before this life.
The salty wind blowing off the harbor of Busan, South Korea, carries the smell of heavy diesel fuel, massive shipping containers, and the ultra-modern pulse of a soaring 21st century metropolis. In a high-rise apartment building overlooking the coast, 4-year-old Min-ji lived an otherwise ordinary life with her parents. Her family consisted of young, tech-savvy professionals who spent their time operating digital marketing firms and participating in the bustling, hyper-modern lifestyle of South Korea. They had zero interest in European medical history, spoke no French, and owned no textbooks on 19th century microbiology. Yet, on a humid evening in July 2023, the family's orderly routine was completely shattered by an intense behavioral transformation in their daughter. Min-ji refused to sit at the dinner table. When her mother handed her a clean bowl of rice and a glass of milk, the child did not eat. Instead, she pushed the glass away with a look of profound disgust, her tiny face contorting into an expression of severe clinical authority. "The white water is alive," the little girl said in formal Korean, her voice completely stripped of its usual childish playfulness. "It has not been heated. If you do not boil it until the small beings die, it will sour in the stomach and bring the fever. You are feeding the family corruption because you cannot see what crawls inside the fluid." Her mother was completely stunned. Min-ji had never seen a farm, nor had she ever been taught about the pasteurization of dairy products. When her father jokingly told her that the milk was fresh from the store, Min-ji stood up on her chair, staring down at him with a cold, unyielding gaze that felt incredibly ancient. "The stores do not understand the air," the child whispered, her small fingers tapping tightly against the tabletop. "The air is full of small rods. They are tiny, invisible creatures that fall into our wine, our milk, and our wounds. They do not drop from heaven. They come from parents just like us, and they multiply in the dark until everything rots. I spent my whole life fighting them in Paris. I locked myself in the vault with the spinal cords of rabbits just to find the weapon to stop them. My eyes are half blinded from looking into the tubes, yet you ask me to trust what is clean." Over the following months, Min-ji's life became governed by an absolute, exhausting obsession with sterilization. She refused to touch doorknobs, toys, or even her own clothes unless she saw her mother boil them or wipe them down with strong chemicals. She would wash her hands under hot water until her skin was raw and red, crying out that she could still smell the sweet, sickening odor of vinegar fermentation and rotting beer from her old workshops in Lille. But the most alarming symptom for her parents was her physical reaction to dogs. Whenever a neighborhood pet approached her on the street, Min-ji would experience an immediate, terrifying panic attack. She would not just cry. She would scream in a deep, guttural voice, clutching her left arm, and shouting about a young boy named Joseph, who had been bitten 14 times by a mad creature. She would wrap her arms around her head, weeping that the frothing saliva of the animal carried an invisible poison that traveled slowly up the nerves to the brain, and that she held the only cure in her glass vials. The turning point occurred when her father took her to a medical center for her routine childhood vaccinations. As the nurse prepared the sterile needle, Min-ji did not flinch or cry out in fear like other children. She watched the fluid enter the syringe with absolute clinical fascination, her breathing slowing down to a calm, professional rhythm. "The principle is simple," the 4-year-old muttered to the astonished nurse. "We weaken the enemy first. We make the beast tired, and then we throw it into the blood so the body can learn to fight before the real army arrives. I saved the boy from Alsace with this method, even when the doctors told me I would go to prison if he died." What began as an extreme psychiatric phobia soon drew the attention of independent cognitive researchers investigating childhood memory anomalies and unlearned linguistic behaviors. By late 2023, a specialized team arrived in Busan to document Min-ji's persistent, detailed claims. The primary mandate of the investigation was to isolate the child's spontaneous knowledge baseline under strict laboratory conditions, eliminating any possibility of parental coaching or media contamination. The methodology was highly disciplined and non-leading. The researchers isolated Minji in a playroom equipped with specialized observation tools, keeping her parents entirely silent behind a partition. The team provided the 4-year-old with a series of basic molecular models, small plastic spheres representing different atoms, and a set of blank glass petri dishes, offering no verbal cues or historical names. Minji completely ignored the dolls and standard toys in the room. She moved directly to the plastic atomic models. Her small hands began sorting the colored spheres into complex, mirrored arrangements. She built 2 identical structures, then turned one of them upside down, holding them up to the window light to observe how they rotated the rays. "The tartrate crystals," Minji murmured in a low, gravelly monotone, using her thumb to separate the plastic pieces. "They look exactly the same when you look from above. But one turns the light to the left, and the other turns it to the right. Life is dissymmetric. Only the things born from life can choose a single side of the mirror. The dead chemicals are always balanced, but the living soul chooses a direction." When the video recording of this session was later reviewed by a professor of organic chemistry at Seoul National University, the reaction was one of complete disbelief. The 4-year-old girl was accurately demonstrating and explaining the concept of molecular chirality, the legendary breakthrough regarding paratartaric acid that Louis Pasteur achieved in 1848. Which laid the foundation for modern stereochemistry. This concept is a highly complex, university-level chemical principle that is completely absent from primary education and children's media. The investigation deepened when the team analyzed the child's physical gait. Minji walked with a very distinct heavy limp on her left side, dragging her left leg slightly behind her whenever she became fatigued. Her parents had taken her to multiple orthopedic specialists, who confirmed that her bone structure, muscles, and nerve path in her legs were completely normal. Yet, when asked why she walked that way, Minji dismissed the doctors with a sigh. "The stroke took my left side when I was 46, she explained simply in her formal Korean dialect. "The brain bled because I worked too hard without sleep. I thought my work was over, but I had to keep going. The invisible world does not stop killing children just because an old man is tired and half paralyzed." Every statement was time-stamped, cataloged, and cross-examined against historical archives. The research team verified that the family possessed no digital footprint or library books related to French science, 19th century chemistry, or the biography of Louis Pasteur. The data formed an unyielding clinical record of a young girl in modern South Korea who possessed the exact scientific memories and physical pathologies of a long-dead pioneer. The true structural validation of a past life memory case depends entirely on the extraction of obscure, highly specific data points that reside outside the boundaries of popular culture and historical adaptations. The global public myth of Louis Pasteur is defined by simple stories: the invention of pasteurized milk, or the heroic cure for rabies. But Minji's memories completely bypass these theatrical summaries, focusing instead on the grueling, technical, and controversial realities of Pasteur's actual life. During a structured verification session in early 2024, the lead investigator presented Minji with a selection of 10 historical drawings depicting 19th century laboratory equipment, including various types of distillation stills, early microscopes, and uniquely shaped glass containers with elongated, curved necks. The child was asked to select the tool she used to fight the theory of spontaneous generation. Without a single moment of hesitation, Minji's hand went straight to the drawing of a swan neck flask, a highly specific glass vessel with a long-shaped tube extending from the top. She traced the curve of the glass neck with her index finger. "The dust collects in the curve," the child explained coldly. "The air can go inside, but the little rods cannot climb the hill. The broth stays sweet and clear for years, because no life can grow unless a seed falls from the outside. The old professors at the academy called me a liar, but they did not know how to wash their own hands. They brought their dirty fingers to the debate and wondered why their infusions boiled with rot." The research team was profoundly startled. The swan neck flask experiment is the absolute cornerstone of Pasteur's victory over the theory of spontaneous generation in 1862. While it is known to historians of science, the specific physical mechanics of how the dust gets trapped in the curve of the unsealed neck is a detail far beyond the conceptual reach of a 4-year-old child. The investigators then move the questioning toward a deeply private, tragic aspect of Pasteur's life: his family. Minji was asked why she often looked at old photographs of her siblings with such intense sadness. The child sat back, her small hands clenching into fists. "The typhoid took them," Minji whispered, her eyes clouding over with a profound historical grief. "Jeannie died first, then Cecile, then Camille. 3 of my sweet girls, taken by the secret filth in the water before they could even grow up. I was the greatest chemist in France, yet I had to stand by their small beds and watch their bodies burn with the fever, completely powerless to save them. That is why I became obsessed with the tubes. Every time a mother brought a child to my laboratory, I saw the pale faces of my own dead daughters." The verification process reached its peak when Minji described the intense political and ethical crisis surrounding the first human test of the rabies vaccine on Joseph Meister in July 1885. She recalled how she lay awake for weeks in a state of absolute psychological torment, terrified that the experimental injections would actually cause the boy to develop the disease, which would lead to his agonizing death and her total professional ruin. "I was not a doctor of medicine," Minji murmured, her voice trembling with an ancient anxiety. "I was only a chemist. The old academy was waiting for me to make a mistake so they could destroy my name. But when I looked at the boy's wounds, I knew that doing nothing was the greatest crime of all. I gave him the 13 injections of the dried rabbit marrow. Every night, I expected to hear him scream in madness, but the invisible enemy died before it could reach his mind." An objective, scientifically rigorous evaluation of Minji's case requires that we actively challenge the reincarnation hypothesis with the most logical alternative counter-theories. Skepticism is the primary defense mechanism of empirical research. It ensures that a case cannot be built on mere coincidence, parental delusion, or hidden information networks. We must analyze how a 4-year-old girl in Busan could replicate the precise historical consciousness of a 19th-century French scientist. The first alternative hypothesis is accidental media exposure. In our modern world, international historical content is highly accessible through streaming platforms and global algorithms. Could Minji have watched a South Korean educational documentary or an animated history short on a parent's smartphone while they were occupied? The research team conducted a thorough forensic review of every digital device in the home. The search histories revealed an exclusive consumption of local Korean children's programming, standard animations, and online shopping blogs. Furthermore, the highly specialized details produced by Minji, such as the exact chemical logic of molecular asymmetry in tartrate crystals, or the specific historical arguments regarding the swan neck flask experiments, are not themes included in commercial cartoons or family-friendly documentaries. The second theory to consider is cryptomnesia, the retrieval of an unconsciously absorbed but forgotten memory. Could Minji's father, who operated a digital marketing firm, have worked with clients in the pharmaceutical or chemical industry who discussed the history of pasteurization within earshot of the child? While this might explain the accidental learning of a prominent scientific name, it completely fails to account for the child's profound behavioral transformations. Cryptomnesia cannot explain why a South Korean child would develop a severe, crippling somatic limp matching Pasteur's real stroke pathology. Nor can it explain her ability to correctly manipulate atomic models to demonstrate molecular chirality, or her intense, deeply felt emotional identification with the personal griefs of a father who lost 3 daughters to typhoid in the 19th century. A third possibility is parental fabrication or psychological alignment. In rare instances, parents may project a narrative onto a child to gain attention or social media engagement. However, the documentation clearly shows that Minji's parents were deeply distressed by her behavior. They were modern, practical individuals who found the child's extreme germophobia and her claims of a past life to be deeply troubling and socially isolating. They spent months trying to suppress the behavior, consulting child psychologists, and offering her normal toys to encourage her to forget the invisible monsters in the water. As Minji approached her 7th birthday in 24, the researchers recorded the classic, predictable neurological transition. The intense, intrusive memories of the French laboratories began to fade, replaced by the immediate, daily realities of her Korean school curriculum, her friendships, and her development within her native culture. The memories of the test tubes and the old streets of Paris did not vanish entirely, but they retreated into the deeper layers of her subconscious, becoming as distant as a half-remembered childhood dream. What remains is a clinical, documented paper trail of a 3-year window during which a child in South Korea spoke with the authoritative, burdened voice of a man who conquered the invisible world. When we look past the singular, extraordinary case of Minji, we find ourselves entering a vast, global arena of research that challenges the very foundations of the materialistic model of human memory. Her case is not an isolated miracle. It shares an identical structural framework with thousands of cases meticulously archived by academic institutions and international researchers over the past 60 years. These cross-cultural studies reveal a striking, undeniable consistency, regardless of geographic location, religious background, or social class. The spontaneous appearance of memories during the toddler years, the possession of highly specialized knowledge, completely unavailable through normal channels, and a deep, often painful emotional attachment to the unresolved duties of a previous life. Minji's case fits perfectly into this clinical architecture, demonstrating the exact same pattern of early behavioral intensity followed by a natural stabilization as the child's brain matures and integrates into her current life. This case forces us to look at Louis Pasteur through a lens entirely stripped of institutionalized praise and scientific iconography. In modern history books, Pasteur is a cold, objective giant of medicine, an intellectual machine who calmly charted the laws of hygiene. But Minji's memories return this historical giant to the level of raw, vulnerable human reality. She did not remember a glorious myth. She remembered a life defined by relentless, exhausting warfare against an enemy that no one else believed existed. She recalled the crushing loneliness of a scientist who had to fight the medical establishment of an entire nation, the physical agony of a body broken by a stroke, and the profound exhaustion of a father who had to watch his own children die from the very microbes he would spend his life learning to destroy. It invites a profound transformation in our understanding of human consciousness. If the mind is merely an accidental spark produced by localized brain chemistry, then Minji's knowledge of molecular chirality and private French medical history is an impossible contradiction. But if consciousness is a larger, non-local field, a current that can cross vast oceans, centuries, and cultural divides, carrying the memories of an early French laboratory into the mind of a child born in modern South Korea, then human identity is far more ancient and interconnected than our current sciences dare to assume. History is not a graveyard of forgotten names. It is a living, breathing landscape, constantly echoing beneath the surface of our modern world. The grand marble crypt beneath the Pasteur Institute in Paris stands silent and dark, its walls decorated with beautiful mosaics depicting the scientific triumphs of a man who has been dead for well over a century. Millions of researchers and tourists look at the stone monument every year, paying respect to a historical figure who remains frozen in the cold prestige of European history. Across the oceans, in the bustling harbor district of Busan, a young Korean girl laughs heartily as she runs along the beach, her little hands picking up wet shells without the slightest fear of dirt or dust. The contrast is absolute and beautiful. The historical icon remains locked in stone, trapped within national myths, textbooks, and scientific monuments, but the living consciousness is entirely free. Minji walks through her modern life, her spirit no longer burdened by the agonizing weight of a paralyzed body, the terrifying anxiety of medical trials, or the silent grief of a father standing over the graves of his children. The old glass flasks have been locked away in museums. The laboratories of Paris have turned to modern research centers. The furious arguments of the old academy have faded into silence. Yet, for a brief, incredible window of time, the immense chronological and cultural chasm between 19th century France and 21st century Korea collapsed entirely, leaving behind only the quiet, unyielding testimony of a little girl who looked into the darkness and remembered what it felt like to save humanity from the invisible. This has been Before This Life.